Hi everyone, it's Ren here. Welcome to my room, guys. I hope you're well today. Today we're going to be talking about unlikable INFJs, which is kind of an interesting topic, right? Talking about the experience as an INFJ or as another type, but I think it's particularly interesting as an INFJ to encounter people who are of your type and yet you don't really like them. Without necessarily jumping to the conclusion that they must be of another type, because it's obvious that, you know, when you hear that someone else is of your type and you have good reasons for believing it, I think there is quite a natural, spontaneous feeling of, maybe I wouldn't necessarily go so far as to say brotherhood, but a sense of community. We have something in common. You kind of feel that connection with them. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you can actually get on with them. And it may well turn out that, like, some people who are INFJ might annoy you mightily, and I was kind of interested in the idea of exploring what might be the main traits that these INFJs have that could be irritating. Obviously, that depends in part on who you yourself are as a person and what ticks you off, what gets on your nerves. But I think that there might be a way to kind of explore this a bit and move beyond the cliche that INFJs are advocates and diplomats and they care about being liked by everybody. I mean, it's there's certainly a grain of truth to that, that INFJs are kind of a mix of, like, intellectual but also kind of social and emotional. But there's lots of different stripes of INFJ, and so lots of different ways in which an INFJ could be unhealthy, I guess, and displaying behaviors that are annoying. And again, without jumping to the all too easy conclusion that that person is only pretending to be INFJs. We don't want to have an essentialized conception of what an INFJ is. Just before I move on, remember that I've written 2 books in the last couple of years. My book on the INFJ, The Ecstatic Soul, check it out, the link's below, less than $10. And my new novel, The Infinite Castle. If you're into Kafka, Dostoevsky, Murakami, and tortured INFJ protagonists, then check it out. Also less than $10. There's obviously, like, among certain types of intellectual people, one type that can be irritating is the know-it-all. But I don't think that that's a type that you will often come across with INFJs. You might certainly come across people that know a lot or think they know a lot, but usually their shtick won't be about sort of showing that in your thoughts. I think that the trait that can be annoying about INFJs is that they think that the knowledge that they have accumulated, certain types of very kind of NI heavy INFJs, with a certainly a relative deprivation of TI and even more so of FE. No need to even mention inferior SE in this case. They kind of get lost in their own world. They accumulate a lot of information which they interpret in a very subjective way, and they are able to construct a universe in their head that then, when they're shared with others, and others are like, well, actually, I don't agree with this, or I don't think that that's right, or they try to kind of debate, the INFJ might imply not that they're stupid necessarily, but that they are just blinded by some ethical commitment to the wrong cause. So that's why, paradoxically, and this is kind of it's a bit difficult to say because it hurts, but I think there are a lot of NI leads among conspiracy theorists, because I would say subtle, and complex and articulate conspiracy theorists, like not not your sort of meat and potatoes person going like, oh, you know, like all politicians are this, or you know, it's all the Jews or whatever, you know, like real complex, articulate, crazy systems that they come up with. I mean, if you think about it, what is better than NI to come up with that? I mean, you could say TI could work around that. The thing is, the TI has a deconstructive function as well, and the deconstruction function of TI is going to kind of pose a threat, I think, to that enterprise. And that's why I also mentioned that for the INFJ of this sort, we're not necessarily talking about an NI-TI loop as such. You know, we know that that can be a sign of unhealth for INFJs, but these INFJs are not necessarily looping, because the TI is not really that developed anyway. You know, so if there's a loop, it's looping with some very dysfunctional TI. But you know, it's creating stories in their heads that are very, very developed. That happens with INTJs too, perhaps even more so. With INTJ, perhaps there will be more emphasis on the stupidity of the person who doesn't believe, rather than their ethical failings or their being blinded by other discourses, you know. But that can happen, and I've seen that happen a lot, you know, and it being very difficult for these types to get out of their stories, because they've developed entirely subjectively in their own little internal system, and they reason according to that system. And another type that I wanted to mention briefly that I have also noticed, but online among INFJs, that can be a bit irritating, is the, it's kind of sad to say in a way, but it's always going to be sad to say if you're an INFJ and you're talking about cases of people that have disappointed you or irritated you and that are of your type. It's the kind of what I would call the herd INFJ. It happens, you know, and that's and my reasoning for this, and what makes it doubly annoying, is often these INFJs have the resources to see that they're not in the right, and that they're not siding with the right person, and that the kind of, you know, the bullying that either they're taking part in or that they're allowing to happen by not really sort of criticizing it, is completely off, you know. But we're back to this idea that I developed in my previous video of this liminal space, of this intermediate space that's really uncomfortable between being completely reliant on your own resources with a risk of solipsism, which can lead, among other things, to this kind of conspiracy theory side of things, to the more social side. You have this intermediate stage where you feel very exposed and you care a lot about what people think. It's a transition, but during this transition, you're a little bit vulnerable, and you're more prey, as a means of defending yourself, to siding with whoever is more potent socially. And if someone is being ostracized or isolated, and you don't necessarily agree with it, you may lack the courage to actually take a stand. And I've seen a lot of INFJs, or not maybe a lot, but some INFJs do that. And it was hard to really realize, yes, they are INFJs, they probably know better, but they can sort of convince themselves that, you know, they're doing the right thing, to not have too much dissonance. So a little bit of cowardice, basically, you know, a little bit of cowardice, social cowardice, which is linked, I think, to the vulnerability stage that I talked about. So I can understand where it comes from, but it's never pleasant to see. So I'll just talk about these two types for now, because I don't want to be too negative about people in my own family. I'm really curious to see what the reactions are to this video, because I have no idea. Don't forget that you can support me on Patreon, by the way. I've been having some new people support recently, so responding positively, and I'm super grateful for that. Thank you so much. It really helps. Okay, so hopefully I will be able to record some videos for next weekend. I'm going to be traveling quite a bit, but I'll try and find a way, maybe to record some videos in advance. We'll see, but you'll certainly hear from me in some format. Okay, see you then, guys. Bye bye.